Lakeland.
So where is Canada after this last lost anti-development Liberal decade? Only 11 years ago, Canada became internationally recognized as home to the richest and biggest middle class in the world, with more children lifted out of poverty than ever before. And heading into 2015, the budget was under control with $1 billion surplus, and Canada's economy was the strongest in the G7, the last in and the first out of the great global recession. Today, Canada's economy has fallen behind our allies. Productivity lags. Workers can't make ends meet and wonder whose job will be gone next. Canada's natural wealth sits idle in the ground and offshore. Investment heads south and to other countries. Families and people with no one else to count on but themselves fall further behind. Young people lose hope for their futures, whether they will ever be able to afford a home, build up a next nest egg, or actually capture their big dreams. Communities lose opportunities and dwindle. Businesses close due to excessive red tape, taxes, costs, constant uncertainty, and have to reduce their charitable and community contributions. Violence, crime, mental distress, and suicides, especially among rural men, are on a steady rise. Killing energy projects doesn't just cut jobs, or cost jobs, it costs communities. It takes away critical revenue to build roads and bridges, critical support for social programs, to build arenas, support healthcare like the long-term partnerships with the Lloydminster and Bonnyville Regional Health Foundations and energy companies, and to build schools and universities. Today, Canada works for the super rich, the well-established, the elites, the well-connected, the big companies of all kinds, and mostly foreign founded and multinationals. But it doesn't work for the Canadian people who do the work, who take big risks and build big projects, for individual entrepreneurs, small business owners, innovators, for the workers and contractors who fuel, feed, and power this country, for our Canadian people. That's the Liberal legacy. And the cost to Canadians is real, and it's staggering. So today we MPs find ourselves in an odd position. This very same government that inflicted the last decade of anti-energy, anti-private sector death by delay and uncertainty on natural resources workers and businesses in every corner of Canada, that harmed all the secondary and tertiary sectors that depend on it everywhere, allies sent away in dire need of Canadian resources and divided our country, pit Canadians, provinces, businesses, and sectors against each other, suddenly claims to want big natural resources and infrastructure projects to get built in Canada. Albertans cut emissions not by shutting down, but by showing up and building through free enterprise, innovation, and technology, getting better emissions reduction results, real emissions reduction results, without killing jobs or driving away investment. Yet this Liberal government still treats Alberta and every province that develops resources, those of us in the so-called ROC, the rest of Canada, that politicians in Ottawa usually ignore, as problems, not solutions. They punish the most responsible energy producers in the world and give a free pass to foreign polluters. They celebrate emissions reductions in Canada when they come from lockdowns, lost jobs, and bankrupt businesses. Canadians can't afford essentials because the government dries up costs and imposes unrealistic targets on power and fuel. And it's worse when the facts don't fit their narrative. When it turns out Alberta reduces emissions the most, the Liberals stay silent. When LNG could displace coal for growing energy demand in Asia, India, and Africa from BC, or help secure European energy needs and cut dependence on Russia, the Liberals turn allies away. When Western provinces want to build major projects or Northerners want to mine and drill offshore, the Liberals deny, ban, and delay. When Atlantic Canadians want to drill offshore, ship LNG to Europe, or have a pipeline bring Western oil to Eastern refineries so future generations of Atlantic Canadians can stay home with jobs and abundant opportunities, the Liberals interfere and then look away. And let me pause here to tell you how important that issue is to me, because the fact is that Atlantic Canadians and Albertans are inextricably linked. We've helped build each other's province to the best interests of all Canadians, and I say that as a first-generation born and raised Albertan, as the daughter of a Nova Scotian and a Newfoundlander. When the Liberals spent years talking about reconciliation, yet delay, risk, or kill pipelines, roads, mining projects, and LNG opportunities that so many Indigenous leaders, elders, youth, entrepreneurs, and workers spent years negotiating with businesses to get jobs, to get their own source revenue, and to do environmental oversight in a good way. The Liberals claim to support First Nations, but deny them of the opportunity to own, to build, to partner, and to profit. It's not reconciliation when Ottawa decides who can build and who must wait. It's not partnership when one side always says no. And it's not respect when Indigenous voices are ignored because they want to make their own development decisions and exercise their rights and title.
Hear, hear.
This bill that we debate today proves what Conservatives have said all along. The Liberals' anti-development agenda kills Canadian jobs, kills Canadian investment, weakens Canada's security, unity, and sovereignty, and has made our country a risky place where nothing can get built and where uncompetitive, pancaked, and incoherent taxes, laws, and policies, uncertainty, and constant changing goalposts deter big projects from our own country. Canadians deserve a plan based on facts and results, not vague statements and delay from the same government that caused the problems they suddenly now claim to want to fix. The consequences of the Liberals' anti-development decade are growing poverty, not prosperity, and fractured national unity. They pit Canadians against each other and attack Albertan businesses in particular with constant misinformation and myths. The reality is, when Alberta builds and grows, so does Canada. When Alberta is strong, so is Canada. And Albertans have been there all along with our friends from Saskatchewan and from Atlantic Canada.
Hear, hear.
We've just been asking the Liberals to help get the country's top export from the industry that is still the biggest investor in Canada's declining economy by far, whether the anti-energy zealots like it or not, to more markets globally so Canada isn't dependent on the United States. But 10 years later, 10 years of this last anti-development Liberal decade, Canada faces economic, security, and sovereignty threats from our closest ally, the world's biggest economy, our biggest customer, and now, because the Liberals held Canada back every step of the way, our biggest competitor. And Canadians can't afford essentials because the government drove up the costs of power and fuel for everyone. Now, make no mistake, it didn't have to be this way. But with all due respect, by which I mean almost none, the time to, quote, build Canada, to make our country self-reliant, secure, united, and strong was the last decade. And the answer has always been to unleash Canada's natural resources and increase production and export customers, as Conservatives, and only Conservatives, have consistently and unequivocally advocated the entire time. This was never actually an even-sided theoretical or philosophical debate. It has always been simply the fiscal and economic reality of our country. Canadians deserve a government that backs them, not a government that blocks them, not a government that pees down our leg and tells us it's raining. C-5 is breadcrumbs and baby steps not a real breakthrough of Liberal-inflicted barriers on Canada. Our country needs real change and long-term concrete certainty for the private sector and for Canadian workers to make us autonomous, resilient, and secure, like the Liberals say they want to do now, even though they've been in charge around here for the last 10 years. So what would that actually look like? Well, it would mean fixing the fundamentals. Repeal the failed no new pipelines, never build anything, Bill C-69, rife with uncertainty, no concrete timelines despite Liberal claims, arbitrary and unrelated conditions, political interference, and jurisdictional overreach that the provinces and territories, businesses and Indigenous groups all oppose or want to overhaul, and the Supreme Court declared unconstitutional for all the reasons, every single reason, in fact, that Conservatives, and it happened to be me, warned about during the debates. But Liberals ignored this entire Conservative team, all the premiers, all the territorial leaders, the private sector, and the Senate, and rammed it through anyway. They should repeal the shipping ban, Bill C-48, that blocks dedicated export routes for Canada's much-needed energy to countries with actually emerging markets who need Canadian energy and technology in Asia, like Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and the Philippines, and to European allies like Germany, Latvia, Ukraine, Greece, and Poland, and the geopolitical security aspects of this issue obviously cannot be overstated. That ban signals that shipping may be blocked by the government off any coast, just like their offshore unilateral drilling bans and anti-development zones on land and in water. But it stays. And clearly the Liberals are A-OK with Canada's allies and other countries getting energy they'll continue to want long into the future from the U.S. or from foreign regimes like Venezuela, Libya, Iran, and Saudi Arabia over Canada, which with much lower environmental, labor, and safety standards, where the benefits usually only go to a wealthy few. Repeal the Canadian oil and gas cap that will cut Canadian energy production by 5%, will kill over 50,000 jobs and over $20 billion from Canada's GDP. That's self-inflicted sabotage that no other country in the world is doing to itself, and totally nonsensical for what is actually a radical anti-energy government suddenly plagiarizing, like someone's thesis, the former Conservative government's vision for Canada as an energy superpower. While the minister and his Liberal buddies laughed when I asked questions about job losses, Canadians stress, wondering where their next paycheck will come from. In 2021, TD Economics projected Canadian oil and gas jobs, up to 75% of them, could disappear by 2050. Wow. The Liberals call it a transition. For Canada, it's devastation. So they should repeal the globalist top-down economic restructuring just transition plan in Bill C-50 that the Liberals already know will threaten the livelihoods of 2.7 million Canadians and cause labor disruptions, that's bureaucraties for job losses, for 642,000 workers in the transportation sector, almost 300,000 agriculture workers, 202,000 energy workers, and get this, 193,000 in Canada's important manufacturing sector, maybe more important than ever before, given this world becoming more dangerous and the global threats that Canada faces because this Liberal government has failed us.
What? Oh, yeah.